9 minutes after 7 o'clock here on Sky 99.5 FM as we settle nicely inside hour number 2 of the Breakfast Roundtable for today, Thursday, the 13th of July, 2017. And we're so happy to have this next guest in studio with us, an old friend who looks, young.
Thank you.
We're speaking of none other than Mr. Keston Nancoo. He is the chairman of the Employers Consultative Association, the ECA. And the ECA, they're best friends with us here at Sky. And we want to say congratulations to you, Mr. Nancoo, for again assuming the mantle of chairman, because I think this is your second or your second go around. Yes. Okay. All right. Now, Mr. Nancoo, we see, certain things happening in the economy. We would have heard from the Prime Minister in his conversations on at Point Fortin this week, some hard facts. It's not the first time he has shared those hard facts, but for some reason, people are afraid to deal with those hard facts and the implications of those hard facts. One of the implications is that we all have to pull together to come up with a solution. But somehow people are either afraid or they're reluctant, or when they try and they become rebuffed, they become gun shy and they say, well, I'm taking all my marbles and I'm going home, which is what we've seen with one of the pillars of the Tripartite Advisory Council. Can we speak to some of these issues? Because these are tough times, and tough times call for people who have a particular inner strength to walk the country through. It's not just sailing and steering the ship now. We are literally walking through the troubled waters, as it were, of a rapidly rushing river. Yeah?
Sure. And so let me start by saying it's really a pleasure to see you again. I wondered where you were, So it's happy to see you. And when I heard Edison Carr, I said, but that's Radio Trinidad and all the rest of it.
Yes.
So really it's a pleasure to be here this morning. And more importantly, I quite like your introduction, because it gives me an excellent opportunity for us to have a conversation, and hopefully our listening audience will leave them with some takeaways, some things that they need to ponder on. Mm-hmm. So let me get right into how we got to this place, and I think that's a useful starting point. Yes. How we got to this place. We have been. When you look at the global economy and the fragility of it, that's on one level. Because as we all know, that policy decisions from global players will have and continue to have an impact on emerging economies such as ours. Okay? There's a lot of uncertainty around. The more recently concluded G20 summit, there is clear evidence of realignment and configuration of alliances among world leading economies. Mm-hmm. That too. So in a nutshell, at a very high level, that's the global picture. But then when we move into the TNT, our macroeconomic landscape, we have situations, amongst others, as rising debt to GDP ratio and overall economy stagnating. We have continued dependence on the petroleum sector in a time of declining oil and gas revenues. And I think more significantly, declining oil and gas revenues to the government means a reduction in the fueling of the economy through government spending. Okay? That, when you put that together with the social challenges and, crime. I mean, I heard a commentator speaking about Penguin 34 years ago, who sang, "We living in jail."
Oh, yes.
And
prophetic.
I mean, is it that Penguin, like the former the founding father of the nation, Eric Williams, with the lessons and what he shared with us, is he a seerman, as we would coin in Trinidad and Tobago, to have predicted some of the realities that we are experiencing today?
Because what he enunciated in that calypso is so brilliant and so delineated that you can think he was still alive and writing.
And even more so now.
And what about Lord Relator, when he was on his Lord Relator talking about food prices.
Food prices. You know, so the Calypsonian continue to provide us with food for thought, you know. Even in the context of we've heard about the good news of where the gas fine and all the rest of it. But you know, we got to ponder as a people, and this has an nexus to the why we have not really moved forward with diversification of the economy. We have been talking about it. Is it that we already have the infrastructure and the training and the knowledge base and so on in that sector? And there's always a glimmer of hope because, you know, God is a Trinity. So there's always a glimmer of hope. But even if we realize some benefit from the oil fine, from the juniper arrangement, one may wonder if the good news of the pending increase in natural gas production may not be an inhibitor to other avenues of economic development as players await the traditional upsurge in government revenues with its traditional consequences, as we are seeing now. Okay? When we look in terms of our social challenges, you know, our values, our attitudes, our behaviors, especially the pervasive culture of dependency, the sense of entitlement and complete disregard for the rule of law. My God, you see it every day, and it's just getting worse. And I'm saying all this to say, how do we move from here? How do we change the behaviors? And not necessarily change, but how do we begin to influence changes in behavior? Because at the end of the day, that is what is going to drive, and that commitment. Now, let me...
As you make that point, I'm just thinking what you are calling for as a prescription to what we're seeing now. It's not just about government getting some increased revenues and then plugging holes and patching and doing some quick fixes. But you're talking about and you're demanding full-scale national transformation from the very basic levels, come right up. Everything. In not just you know, being good citizens or being patriotic citizens, but observing the rule of law, conducting ourselves with civility, and also being productive citizens in the workplace as well, understanding that when we do our bit, whether it's 8 to 4, 9 to 5, 7 to 3, when we do our bit, it goes towards making Trinidad and Tobago a better place to live and be.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And this is why I like engaging with you and having these very, what I call honest conversations, you know, because having an honest conversation is what, at the end of the day, makes the difference. Yeah? What makes the difference? You know, we look at what has taken place, our institutions. My God. I mean, the more recently, the GSLC, I mean, the judiciary, you know, you have
all of the institutions.
All of our institutions, you know, we need, as a matter of urgency, to begin to rebuild our institutions. Because on the one hand, we are saying to our young people, you ought to, it's always the right time to do the right thing. But where are the exemplars? Where are the exemplars? When I was growing up, you know, and I'm sure Edison, you know, we understood that our elders, you know, you had to respect, and it had nothing to do with whether it was your father, your uncle, or whoever it was. You know, that extended family, which we have lost, I guess, because of migration and all the rest of it. You know, and we need as a people to get back to that. Let me shift a bit and talk about the business organizations. And you mentioned earlier, before we came on air, about, you know, levels of selfishness where we have found it difficult as a people, to move from sectoral interests to national interests. And I'm going to deal with national interests in a little bit because I think that's the lack of a definition is what is inhibiting the progress towards that. So you have the trade union movement leaving the tripartite construct, which really, to some extent, nullifies the overall or the relative impact of that very important process. Okay? My term, and for the next, I would say, 12 months is a long time because I am one who I'm highly motivated and driven, and I want to get things done. Okay? And the only way I can get things done is through people. Okay? So, where that is concerned, we need to begin, and this is why my theme in returning to office is re-engaging social partners on our national watchwords: discipline, production, and tolerance. Okay? Now, the re-engagement, quite naturally, is going to take some doing, but I feel very motivated and confident that the ECA has a responsibility to lead the way and to lead the charge. Yeah? And lead the charge in the context of how do we create an enabling environment that would facilitate those conversations, the level and kind of collaboration that is going to be required to re-engage partners.
Mr. Nancoo, the trade union movement is saying that they had conversations which precipitated the MOU and the tripartite arrangement, as the case might be, business, labor, and the government, as the case, and so on. But some of the partners were government decided to take measures without any kind of consultation with labor, as the case might be. And they're saying, we may disagree about some of the actions you're taking, but at least let's hew to the MOU and talk with us. You just can't take a partisan opinion, as the case might be. So they withdrew from the tripartite arrangement.
Edison, you've hit the nail on the head again. My view on that, we have been around for far too long. We all must be aware, just as I say to my people in my organization, my executives and my managers and so on, you got to have an appreciation of the labor legislation because the industrial court is a court of records. You can't make things up. You got to ensure the due process is followed. Okay, it may take a little while longer to treat with a matter, in a particular way. But for God's sake, we need to follow the process. Now, I may be criticized for this, but it is a fact. I see it over and over and over. So coming back to the awareness, once you have an RMU in your entity, what is wrong with you having a conversation with the representatives saying, look, it does not deny you or debar you from, in the end, achieving the desired outcome. But you have an obligation to consult. You have an obligation to have conversations. Again, I want to repeat, it does not debar you at the end of the day from achieving the desired outcome.
Indeed. But what about the results from labor is that take your rig and go?
No. I spoke about that when it occurred. And again, it is about if you want to influence change, if you want to make a difference, you got to stay in the game. You can't walk off the field and expect to get the result that you initially desired. Okay? You have to be in the game. You have to be on the field of play. Because it's only at the table or on the field of play that you can continue to influence the kind and quality of behavioral changes that one expects. Now, again, just coming back to the whole question of business and the whole tripartite process, there's far too much, there is a high level of disunity, as you just pointed out. And that level of disunity, it makes it difficult for us to speak with one voice. It makes it difficult for us to focus on what we keep talking about that seems to be very elusive, which is the national interest. Can we work together in the national interest? But let's step back. Why, and ask ourselves, why have we not progressed much further?
Could it be that for some people the national interest means different things? Everyone has a different vision of what national interest is. And in some people's minds, national interest really means my interests or my group's interests. And because my group is very powerful in the nation, then once our interests are taken care of, everything else is okay.
Again, you are smack on. So we need to have these interviews every other day. Because I'm
Sounds
sure,
like a plan.
Yeah, because, this is why I was coming to. Why haven't we made the kind of progress that we, after 25 years, yeah? Mm. What therefore do we mean when we refer to national interests? Do parties in the conversation really possess a shared common understanding? Given the fact that the meaning of national interest is a vague and ambiguous term that carries a meaning according to the context in which it is used. Okay? The fact that this ambiguity hinders the process of formulating a universally accepted definition, it is of even greater significance why social partners should be totally committed to a deep discussion of the meaning of and components of national interests. B, the promotion of a culture and institutionalization of the system of tripartism and social dialogue in Trinidad and Tobago. More than that, on the notion of promoting a culture of tripartism and social dialogue, we need to plumb the depths of questions relating to what we really believe about one another, about Trinidad and Tobago, and about the value of cooperation and dialogue. It is what we really believe that will drive our behavior over time. It would be our disbelief and doubt that will cause us to withdraw from the process, which is what took place. From the process in times of uncertainty and challenge.
So how does the ECA Council advise its members in hard times and perilous times as we are going through now? How do we deal with retrenchment of workers, as the case might be?
Okay.
Do we use it as a first essay, a first attempt to get the business on an even footing, or at the slightest sign of bad times, we retrench people? Because I go through the commercial areas of Port of Spain and so on. You go through St. James, you go through Woodbrook and so on. A lot of businesses have closed, and I suppose some of these have people of 5, 8 people in the businesses, the case might be. What have you heard from your members as to the reason for going out of business? And it means that we are not even hearing how many people are really have been retrenched.
Well, Edison, from the ECA's perspective, as a matter of fact, when we recognize where the economy was going and the relative impact on the sustainability of business, we held some sessions inviting our members, to talk about alternative means. Retrenchment ought not to be the first resort. Mm-hmm. It ought to be the last resort. And in those conversations, we spoke to them and we shared, and that is where building a relationship with your people, whether you have a trade union or not, it is about relationship building and partnering with the people who work for you. okay, and having honest conversations with them. So if you build that, and as you know, in a relationship, trust is of paramount importance.
Yes.
Okay? So if you build that kind of environment, when the tough time comes, one can reasonably expect, and I've seen it, where employees, when I worked at the brewery, I lived there for 25 years, okay? And I can tell you, at one point when we were facing stiff competition from Stag, yeah, we had to go through, and the company, we sat down and we spoke about a moratorium, okay? And we agreed. I was then one of the leaders of the trade union at the brewery. So I understand both sides of it, yeah? Mm-hmm. So that we sat down and we agreed on a moratorium in terms of increases, in terms of allowances, because that one would have described as being in the interest of the business, yeah? That would have been in the interest of the business. So there are other means. Now, we have other external environmental factors that are impacting on business. You know, the foreign access to foreign exchange and all the rest of it. The whole question of the relationships, you know, between the labor management relationships and all the rest of it. And that is where the ECA, my commitment is to create an environment where we can re-engage social partners, especially the business community. I am going to be meeting with my counterparts in the respective business organizations, and let's talk about not just why we are where we are, but more importantly, how can we move forward? And it has to begin with a conversation as to, because if we agree on the principle or the definition of what is in the national interest, then the solutions would be much easier, you know, much easier for us to arrive at the solutions.
We are speaking with ECA Chairman Keston Nancoo on the Breakfast Roundtable. We've got to take a short break, but we will be back as we continue this very important national discussion here on Sky.
Sky 99.5 FM. On air, online, everywhere.
7:34.5 is our time here on Sky 99.5 FM. We continue our look at what exactly is national interests. Do we all have the same vision? Are we all really on board together in Trinidad and Tobago wanting the best for TNT? Are we prepared to humble ourselves and put our shoulders to the wheel and turn our country away from the downward slide, the precipitous downward slide that it's been experiencing for quite some time? Well, we've got in with us Chairman of the ECA, Keston Nancoo, who has been, really pondering this situation and has decided that I'm going to stand up and be counted. I want to lead the charge and be a change agent and help all the others who are interested in being change agents. Let's all come together to make TNT better. Mr. Nancoo.
Sure. And as we continue the conversation, it's really then, how do we get social partners to the process to come to the table and speak honestly about how do we define collectively the national interest. And I am of the view that if we can get there, now let me hasten to add, that is going to require parties to the conversation giving up something. Okay? And that's where the maturity, and this is why the clarity around defining what are the components of the national interest, this is why it's so important. Because if we can agree on that, then we are going to progress further. When you look at more recently, the trade union movement, one never thought that they would have been able to come together given the divergent views over the last couple of years. But here it is, they have been able to come together, okay, and they are mobilizing as there is a lot of unity amongst the partners. Now, I called my friend Mr. Anisette when I heard about it prior to the Labor Day. I said, Mike, I see you're going to embrace and your comrades. He said, yes, Keston. And it was very instructive when he said to me, I've become more mature now. Okay?
Are they seeing a common enemy, and who is the common enemy?
Well, of course, the common enemy would be the owners of capital, yes. and the government is the largest employer. So that, and my concern with that, if I go back to 1970, although that was what drove that was there's some differences, yeah, but my fear and my overall concern is that when people take to the streets, it provides an opportunity for elements in the society who really don't even have a clue about the why of this activity. They get inside there and they play inside there. And so we need, and this is why, again, from the ECA's perspective, I am going on that march to get my people, my colleagues in the business, in business, let us come together. We need to speak with one voice. We can no longer continue to be fragmented in our views and our ideas and all the rest of it,
So if we have a group of people who are filled with a simmering emotion, actually beyond simmering, now bubbling and boiling, and they go out there, there are those who would take advantage of that high degree of emotion, exploit it, and even charge it further, and then we could wind up with disastrous results.
Absolutely. And more importantly, and I think this is something as a people we need to begin to appreciate and understand. It's not sufficiently, it's not known or practiced sufficiently or recognized. Our collective and individual futures are connected to one another, and so too our collective successes or failures are linked inescapably to one another. As social partners, and this to reinforce why we need business need to come together, and we will come together because I am committed to the task, and I'm sure through the process of collaboration, we will get together and speak with one voice.
But have you found that management, have you found that the employer their attitudes have hardened with the polarization with labor? Have you found that, I am fed up with these people now, I'm either going to retrench as the case might be, or I am, so the polarization is, and the chasm is widening and widening and widening, which will make fertile ground for all kinds of things. You just mentioned 1970.
Yeah, Edison, you're quite right. And this is why I'm speaking about the urgency. There's a level of urgency that is required, in the next couple of weeks before, I think the march is on the 4th.
On the 4th of August.
On the 4th of August.
Yes.
So this is why some conversations, need to take place before, in terms of shaping responses, that can hopefully influence changes in behavior.
Are you going to be an active participant as a broker, the ECA, Mr. Nancoo?
Yes, that's part of the whole collaborative process. Meeting with the chamber, my counterparts in the chamber, the TTMF, and other key business entities, because we can no longer continue. And this is not about winning and losing. This is about, again, coming together to define what are the components of national interest. Because, again, as social partners, I am making a clarion call for us to adopt postures of not standing against, but talking with. Not having a face-off, but facilitating meaningful dialogue. I call as well for a return to listening, because we don't listen. We hear. Listening to what is said and not said. Listening for meaning. Listening to our silences. The level of disunity between and amongst constituents is only contributing to the weakening of efforts to progress beyond sectoral interests. Social partners need to be reminded there is power in community. There is power in a true spirit of community. There is power in agreement. Why we talk about, we have the talent and we have the expertise, but for God's sake, why aren't we demonstrating that in a way that will allow us to make a difference?
That word moratorium, would it be current kind of language that you would espouse, Mr. Nancoo? I mean, you spoke about when you were yourself an active trade unionist and so on, and there was a coming together of management and labor for the good of the company. What about now looking at the good of the country? Would that be current, and do you think that would resonate with the unions about a moratorium?
Well, again, Edison, for me, language is important. Language not only defines who we are or who we might become, but language with a level of sincerity and honesty is what is going to make the difference. Now, we got to be mindful that words like moratorium may be construed as bad words, as words that does not support engagement. Okay? So
that is for one segment of society, not for everybody.
Not for everybody,
Yes.
And this is where I am an eternal optimist. I am of the view we have achieved so much as a country in terms of performing on the world stage. What are the energies, the behaviors that would have allowed us as a people to get there? Hazley Crawford, our guy more recently,
Keston
Walcott.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our beauty queens and all the rest of it. We have people, academics, who have excelled. What are we doing? What are we waiting on? And this is why I come back again to the process, to my mind, has to begin with how do we define the components of the national interest? Because that is going to lead us, because we have varying views. It's vague, and that kind of thing.
We have talent who has chosen to come back home, but for some reason is not being utilized the way it should be. And then after a while, that talent gets frustrated and goes and seeks opportunities elsewhere where their talents are greatly appreciated, and they build other economies and other societies and other countries. Yeah. And so all we've been doing is exporting our talent, not realizing that we need to keep some of it. Yeah.
And you're referring to a brain drain which is quietly taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it has to do, and I mean that's a different conversation. The whole question of education, training, and lifelong learning. Yeah, how do we recalibrate and carefully revisit our education system? Is it relevant? And all those are questions that we ought not to run away from.
Yesterday, the Archbishop of Port of Spain has counseled and advised that the CIM examination should be abolished.
Well, I mean, I don't know sufficiently. I came out of the not SE. It was the one before SE.
GCE.
Common entrance.
Common entrance. Mm-hmm. And again, something is fundamentally wrong, because we are not turning out the kind and quality of individual that we ought to be seeing. Is it because values have gone out the window? Is it because of the whole question of the children making children, so there's no one to really ensure and insist, that values are respected and all the rest of it?
I wonder how much of our national watchwords, discipline and production especially, are still relevant today.
Well, and this is why I'm suggesting Edison, that we return the re-engagement of social partners, be built, the conversation be built on our national watchwords of discipline, production, and tolerance, because those are very powerful. Because a lot, when you put that together, that is what I am sure would have gotten us on the national stage. You know, the other thing is, we move the conversation to how can we move to a better Trinidad and Tobago? It is about renewed collective action. Renewed collective action. And more importantly, the time has come for us to move from confrontation to convocation. From confrontation to convocation.
We're speaking with ECA Chairman Keston Nancoo, and he's asking some tough, hard questions. Do we really want to come together and cooperate to make our country strong economically, socially, intellectually, to make it a vibrant land once more? What are your thoughts?
Text us now on 2SKY. That's 2759. We take your calls now. 625-2759. 623-8255. 624-7729.
Good morning and welcome to the Breakfast Roundtable.
Good morning to you, Jesse.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Nancoo.
Yes, he's going to chat with you in a minute.
Oh, Jesse?
Yes.
I tried calling you that day. You asked me to call you.
Yes.
Monday I called but in vain. I wasn't getting through every time I called.
Okay. Well, Mr. Santa Cruz, hold the line. Don't hang up. I will talk with you after you finish chatting with Mr. Nancoo. But go ahead, put your question.
Mr. Nancoo, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Now, early in the discourse, you said that as a matter of urgency, we need to begin to rebuild our institutions.
That's correct.
Now, for the benefit of those of us who do not know, what do we do to begin to rebuild our institutions? Thank you.
Good. Well, again, you would have heard in the conversation my referral to defining what is in the national interest. Okay? And rebuilding of our institutions could very well be one of the components in that conversation. It is not going to be, a walk in the park, but it all has to do with, in the first instance, for parties to the conversation to come together so as to define and bring clarity to what do we mean by what are the components of the national interest. So the national interest, in terms of defining it, one of the components could be rebuilding our institutions. Because if we rebuild our institutions, there's a knock-on effect. It is going to require values, a return to values, living core values. So all the question of honesty, integrity, commitment, loyalty, our commitment to our watchwords, discipline in whatever we do, production. Because if we are disciplined people, the level of productivity ought to be seen in the level of productivity. Okay? And that tolerance is just not tolerance. The tolerance is about respect for each other. And more than that, not just respect for each other, but respect for the otherness. Yeah? Respect for the otherness. And again, I want to repeat, it has to do, to answer your question, I hope I did, it is about parties to the conversation coming together to define what do we mean when we talk about the national interest. Because to my mind, that is what is standing in the way. And if we are able to do that, then we can work back from there and then come forward.
Let's see who else is on the line. Hello, good morning. Hello? Hello, good
Hello.
morning. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
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 Hello?
Hi.
Yes, we are hearing you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm listening to your program and it's sounding very interested. No, I have been working with a small company and I have retired from the government service and I am working with a small company. This program is the youth. The youths and them who live in school, apparently like they are lost. They have nowhere to go. And where I am working right now, I reach retirement age. I have learned a lot with a private company because first time in my life I am working with a private company. And I have learned so much. And about 20 young ladies come in there since I am there and they left. You know, they come in with attitude, they're ignorant, and these children who left now leave school. So there's a problem between the school in here, and when they're coming out of school. No respect at all. They're lost, they don't know where they are going. And when you go in a company to work, whether small or big, you have to start somewhere to build yourself. They have no respect. They're not taking instructions. They have attitude. They're ignorant. So they have to look at the school. Sometimes children coming out with no subject, but still they're supposed to have a place in society. And they have to do something, make the institute stronger, where they could go into the institute and stay there and come out with something. Because when they have to face society, it's a different story. And this is the problem here. When they leave school, secondary school, and they come out, it's a total mess. Thank you.
Thanks very much, caller.
Okay, well, we have two dimensions here. If I understand the comments that you have made. On one hand, I'm of the firm belief that it is not just about the schools, okay, more than it is about the home. So it really begins at the home. That's where you begin to shape the minds and the attitudes, the respect, those values to which we have been talking about this morning. So it's at the home, it's at the home. Because far too often as a society, we are depending on the teacher to do what the parents should be doing. And the time has come for us to go back to basics. You bring your child up in the proper way, with the values, good morning, how are you? Get to church. Get to church. That spiritual aspect is very important. Okay? So that's one part of it.
That's very revolutionary, Mr. Nancoo, to hear somebody from the Employers Association speaking about spiritual attitudes.
Well, Edison...
This is quite revolutionary.
I make no excuses about it. I know where I've come from. I born and grew on Donald Street. If you read Ferdy Ferreira's book,
yes, we interviewed him here last week.
He talks about the barrack yard.
Yes.
I grew up in the barrack yard.
Yes, so did I.
Okay? When I spoke to a young person the other day, and they didn't know what a barrack yard was. Okay? And it's because of the values that I inculcated that allow me to build character on who I am today. And I say to people all the time, if I could have gotten to where I've gotten to, anyone who wants to succeed can in fact succeed. Let me just shift to the second part of your the commentary. Now, employers got to recognize and prepare themselves, their leadership. And by leadership, I mean supervisors, managers, line executives, for what we call millennials. Okay, and that is real. It is said by 2025, 75% of the global workforce is going to comprise millennials. Okay, we can't just ignores that. That's rare. So the resource pool from which we're going to be getting people or employees is going to come from that pool. So you know what? We need to understand what are the motivations and the behaviors of these millennials. I'm not suggesting for one moment that we accept or we encourage poor attitudes. Yeah? But if we are to motivate them and to get them to deliver or to add value, it's going to be very important for us to understand what are their drivers. Okay? So that millennial comes. So two things just to cap off my response to you. We can no longer depend, or we should not be depending, the upbringing of our children should not be confined to the schools or the teachers. It has to begin at home. And there should be a partnership between the teacher and the parent, just like when I went to school. When you got licks just in case and you didn't know. But that may have been out of a conversation that would have taken place with your mother or your father and the teacher or the headmaster, as we used to say long ago. You know, the other aspect of it is the whole question of youth employment. Okay? We do have challenges around youth employment and underemployment. That carries a very high social and economic cost.
But once upon a time, it wasn't an issue because we had apprenticeship programs.
Boy, I tell you, it's just music to my ear. Apprenticeship programs. The people who were able, the labor, the talent we got to fuel Point Lisas came out of the John Donaldson Tech Institutes, the Chatham Youth Camp and all the rest of it. That's 30 years ago. Okay? And for God's sake, why are we not going back as a possible solution? Again, it could be part of the national interest to get refurbished and build and put in place these the apprentice program in these schools. You have children going through Form 1. I know it was tried some time ago, where when you got to third form, you could have made a choice whether you wanted to go to a tech voc.
Yes, or continue with the academic
right.
style of
And you know what?
education.
That churned out a lot of good quality people. Before I forget, you spoke about the spirituality. I am where I am today because of the power and presence of God.
Yes.
Okay? And wherever I go, wherever I am, I'm in this room today, okay? And I can tell you the power and presence of God is here sitting with us. Because that's all I can understand. That's my motivation. Yeah, that's my drive.
Mr. Nancoo, we have to wrap it up because we've got to go to news. I'm so sorry. But you're definitely coming back to spend another morning with us.
We have so much to talk about, and it's like music to the ear. It has been a pleasure. Thanks very much. Let's continue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Keston Nancoo, ECA Chairman, on The Breakfast